Hey everyone, I have a special guest for you today. I have the CEO of a company, a published author, a frequent face on CNBC, and someone who has truly given back to the real estate world. Let's welcome Kathy Fettke to the show. How you doing, Kathy?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It is amazing to watch what you are doing, have done, and I can only imagine will do in the future. How do you do it all?
Oh boy, that's such a good question. I mean, in the beginning, just like any entrepreneur or new business owner, you do everything, and it has been a process. Fortunately, my husband has a business degree, so he understands how to organize the mess usually that I make. So he was my chief support guy.
Yeah.
CSG, I guess, for many, many years. He put the first website together. He's actually the person. I had a real estate show back in 2003 even before that, in San Francisco, where I was desperately trying to figure out how other people make money. I didn't understand why I wasn't one of them. So I just wanted to know, what do they know that I don't know? And so I had this radio show interviewing people, and he's the one that took that show and uploaded it onto this new thing called iTunes. And so we were one of the first podcasts. He just took the show with the commercials and everything, even the name of that station, and uploaded it. But within, oh my gosh, a week, I had listeners in 27 countries. I had Australians calling to, I'll be there tomorrow if you'll help me buy U.S. property. And so another thing he did, he's like, hey, let's just go outside and shoot a video about how you're helping investors around the world find foreclosures, fix them up, and clean up neighborhoods. Let's just take a video, go outside, shoot it by a tree on his iPhone, uploads it on the website. Goldman Sachs sees it, and I end up winning, this top 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs. So he was definitely more than a chief support guy. He's very proactive in seeing what's coming in technology.
Yeah.
But over the last, few years, we've implemented the EOS system.
Mhm.
So now we've completely reorganized everything, and that is what helps us accomplish more. That was a long answer to your short question.
No, it's great. I mean, we love hearing all this because again, you're doing some amazing things. Let's just ground people in who is and in what is Real Worth Network, because it's
It's Real
huge.
Wealth Network,
Real
but we have
Wealth Network. Sorry.
Real Worth Net. We'll get you there too, because that's what most people say. Yeah, Real Wealth Network. So the idea is, I'm from California.
Mhm.
These are the hills that burned last year.
Oh no.
um, well, somehow our house survived. We're very lucky. But I'm from California. It's real hard. It's nearly impossible. I don't like to say impossible, but it's really difficult to find any properties that cash flow. We've kind of hit a ceiling in terms of appreciation. So you
Mhm.
could be the lucky person here who buys a property and gets negative cash flow and yet no appreciation. So that's a situation I've been in before. It's not good.
Yeah.
And a lot of Californians don't really know anything else.
Right.
And other people from high price markets, like the people who would listen to me in Australia, they were actually advised by their CPAs to buy negative cash flow. It's
Oh,
called negative gearing because it would help with their tax breaks and so forth. And they just didn't know any other way.
wow.
And so that's what we've been trying to teach people is, how do the pros do this? How do you really become wealthy and create passive income through property? And
Yep.
everybody knows that's how you do it. Everybody knows the wealthy invest in real estate, and a lot of people think you have to wait until you're a multimillionaire, but the truth is, you can, if you're in the right markets, in the path of progress where there's job growth and population growth, but the home prices, real estate prices haven't gone up yet, that's where you can really make a fortune. So we've been helping people, identify those markets, where are the jobs going, where are the big employers moving to, where are the demographics moving to, and how can you get ahead of that,
Mhm.
get there before the freeways come, get there before the people come, so you can buy cheap
Yeah.
and watch those values go up while you're cash flowing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I I applaud you for that, because again, I'm in California as well, not SoCal. So I'm in the Valley, right? Bay Area, Mountain View, right? Where condos go for $1.4 million, $1.5 million. So I know exactly what you're talking about, negative cash flow, but you're betting on appreciation. It hurts my head.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I retired because of one rental at a time, right? Single family homes. I chose to invest in California, but the Central Valley, right? Fresno, California.
Yeah.
And I had to stay there, right? Because I couldn't afford to buy anything in the Bay Area as a rental. It just wouldn't make sense. So, uh,
Yeah.
you've been doing this a long time. I guess given your experience, I'd love to go back to pre-crash. So let's think like
Okay.
03, 04, 05, because I think it would be great for us to have the conversation, because I've been doing this 20 years as well, and see if we see any similarities between the peak that came in 07 with what now people are calling the peak in 19 or 20.
Oh
Because
yeah,
because
sure.
I think it's different, but let's talk about it. So what were you seeing doing in like 04, 05? What'd you feel in the market? Let's talk about that first.
Well, I was a mortgage broker.
Hmm.
My co-host, the guy who I brought on as a sponsor, was a mortgage broker. Because back then mortgage brokers were the guys with all the money, right?
Oh yeah, I remember.
It was a good business. So he was my sponsor. He made the show possible. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh man, I got to do shows on mortgages. I'm going to lose my audience. But I found out that he was actually very interesting. And I learned, the secret of leverage, of good leverage, that
Hmm.
you can borrow bank money to acquire an asset and let the tenant pay that debt off for you, and anything left over goes in your pocket, and all the appreciation goes in your pocket, and you get all the tax breaks, but you borrow most of the money. And it's the ultimate use of leverage,
Hmm.
borrowing money and having someone else pay it off for you, so that you end up with that asset free and clear. So that was kind of my entree into it. And because we did so many stories on the show of his clients who were really successful at it, our phones were ringing off the hook, and he goes, you know what, just go get your license. I can't handle all this business. So I was a pretty busy mortgage broker right off the bat.
Right.
And my first deal was $1 million refi, and I made $10,000 just pushing some paper. I was like, okay, this is the best business in the world, of course, until it crashed. But in my process of becoming a mortgage broker, I would be in these meetings, and I was so new and so naive, and these sales reps would come in and say, hey, we're giving out up to $5 million loans, NINA loans. What's a NINA loan? Well, it's a no income, no asset loan. We don't need to see anything
Yeah.
and we'll lend you up to $5 million. So I just remember coming home to my husband and saying, I don't understand the financial industry. This is weird.
Yeah.
Why would anyone do that? And then there was the NAGAM. And
Oh.
then there was the loan I submitted where, the bank comes back and says, oh, I'm sorry, your client doesn't earn enough to qualify. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll let him know. And they go, oh, no, we changed his income. Now he qualifies. And I'm like, oh,
Whew.
okay. So again, I come home to my husband, my chief support guy, and it's like, does that sound okay? And because I didn't know. And he goes, no, honey, that sounds like fraud.
Yeah.
No,
No, honey, that's fraud. Yeah.
that's fraud, and I'm like, but everyone's doing it. The bank is doing it. And he goes, yeah, well, everyone doing it doesn't make it right. And everyone
Yeah.
going to jail doesn't sound fun.
Yeah.
So we were, I just didn't do those kind of loans, but I saw what was going
Yeah.
on. And if I turned down people who I knew couldn't afford that payment, and I lost that $10,000 commission, that person would go to the mortgage broker next to me and get the loan. So it was so obvious that there was something very, very wrong, and I couldn't understand it,
Hmm.
why it was happening, or who was behind it, or why a bunch of people at a conference table thought, let's just lend millions of dollars out to people who have no ability to pay it back. Like, I don't know who was behind it, but I knew something was wrong.
Yes.
And that's been kind of my path, is just going, okay, that was my entree into the financial world. So I learned really young that high level executives don't always make the right decisions, and either does the government, and either does the Federal Reserve. Like, all of a
Yeah.
sudden I realized, oh my gosh, there's just a lot of chaos,
Hmm.
and nobody really knows what's going on. And so you just have to figure it out,
Hmm.
and you have to not trust anyone but yourself and your conscience, live in integrity and do the right thing and listen to common sense.
Yeah.
I'm looking around going, this doesn't make sense, but people who'd been in the industry for years were like not questioning it,
Yeah.
So, but it's because I had this radio show on KNEW in San Francisco and then KSFO. It's a pretty big station, so I had a pretty big following. I got to have people like Robert Kiyosaki on to talk to me, and he is a no bullshit guy. Like I would ask him on the show, like, is this normal? And he goes, no, it's not normal. It's complete fraud, and it's going to blow up, and people are not going to be able to pay these back, and it's going to happen, by 2008. Like, they knew, because they knew when these loans were going to reset.
Yeah.
Nothing was a surprise. They knew these are going to reset. People were never able to qualify in the beginning. When they actually have to make their payment, they can't.
Yeah.
So he said he was selling everything in California because that's where prices had gone up the most. It was the biggest bubble. Of course, Arizona and Florida. I mean, we know the places, Nevada. Yeah. The sand states, I guess they say, went up the most. And so then he said, well, I'm like, well, what are you doing? And where are you putting your money if you're selling these properties? Where are you 1031ing into? And he said, Dallas. Now, Dallas today, it's an obvious thing, right? Dallas is a hot market and it has been for a decade. But let me take you back to 2005. It was not a hot market. No. It was a boring market. It was flat. When people listened to that show, I got hate calls saying, man, Kiyosaki doesn't know what he's talking about. There's nothing happening in Texas. They're like, we've owned properties in Texas for 20 years, never made money. Taxes are too high. There's so much land. I mean, I had executives just looking down their nose at me like, you're a dummy. Yeah. You don't know what you're talking about. I got on a flight, though, because I preferred to believe Kiyosaki, and went to Dallas and looked around and started to learn the area. And I saw the job growth, massive, massive job growth, entire freeways with, they call it headquarter row, because so many businesses were moving there. And I mean, you're driving for an hour. Like, it was crazy. And so I'm like, okay, they're talking about Dallas of the last 20 years. What these people aren't seeing is what's coming.
Exactly.
And was my second learning is, okay, first, don't believe anybody else, trust your gut, and then go see for yourself and see what's coming. So after seeing that Dallas was just booming because they were making it a favorable place to do business, California was not. Mm-hmm. So many businesses moving there, highest job growth in the country, but the reputation preceded itself as not a good place to invest.
Yep.
So if you can find a place with a bad reputation that's changing that reputation, but it's going to take a while for others to catch on, that's a key. So in Dallas, we're like, okay, well, where would be the best place? It was kind of north. That's where the businesses were moving. Mm-hmm. Yep. We ended up finding this little town called Rockwall. I talked to, I talked to dozens of property managers, met with people like, where's the growth? I went to the city planning, what's coming. And they were planning freeways. And they were planning this freeway from Dallas to this little town called Rockwall. And that was going to reduce the commute to the job area and to Dallas by half, from an hour to half an hour. And it was cute town, A-rated schools, and the homes were between $120,000 and $140,000, brand new. And they rented for $1,200 to $1,400.
Oh, 1%.
So it was like, what? Okay, even if, I didn't care what anyone else thought. Yeah. It's like, this makes sense. So I bought 5, because back then I was a mortgage broker. I could just fill out some paperwork, turned it in. I had a loan. So I bought 5. I came home. I told my husband. He's like, you did what?
I said, what happened?
I'm just kidding. I sort of let him know, but not really.
Not really.
So that was another thing I learned is, you probably want to include your spouse in financial decisions.
Good idea.
Anyway, he was like, oh, okay. So he came with me on the next trip. We bought like 5 more. And we had, and it was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, wow. So we started talking about it on the show. all of a sudden our phones are blowing up again with people saying, oh my gosh, this all makes so much sense. And so we helped hundreds, if not thousands of people at that time
I'm sure.
sell
Yeah.
their California properties and exchange them into Texas, where they could quadruple their cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And, and they were just like shocked. Like one lady sold 3 properties in Stockton for $400,000 each, 420 even. Dumpy, crappy, high crime property, like bad.
I know Stockton. Yeah.
Dilapidated. She was so disillusioned with real estate when I met her. She's like, real estate is terrible. I bought these 3 properties thinking I would retire, and you're wrong. It's terrible. Like, well, you bought the wrong properties in the wrong market. They're $400,000. They rent for $1,200. That's not going to get you to retirement.
No.
She sold them. I took her to Texas. She bought 9 of those cute little brand new homes in these nice areas with good schools and good landlord laws, so that if your tenant doesn't pay, you can kick them out, versus Stockton, if they don't pay, they still get to stay and play. So she tripled her cash flow. She was able to quit her job. I think she quadrupled it at that time. Quit her job. She's like, okay, I get it. This is how real estate is supposed to work. And then about 18 months later, the properties she sold were worth about $75,000 each.
Yeah. You saved her. You
saved her. I couldn't save the guy who bought. I wasn't the broker, because I don't have the ability to lie to people. I just can't do it. Right. So I could never have been the broker on that deal, but somebody sold those properties. Somebody bought them.
Yeah.
She ended up not losing everything, and and since she bought those properties in Texas, they have gone up in value 3 times.
Oh yeah.
So that $1 million portfolio is now 3 or 4. So that kind of takes you back to where I knew something was wrong. I knew California didn't make sense. I helped hundreds of people get out and get in the right place and not even feel the recession.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. So a couple of things I want to go back to that are awesome. So first and foremost, let's go back to the crazy lending environment, like of 05, 06, right? You talked about Nina loans and all of that stuff. And I want to relate it to today and just make it clear that lending today is very different in 2019. Would you agree?
Yes.
Right. So
so this is the concern so many people have is, wow, you fast forward 10 years, home prices have recovered. So it's taken 10 years. We're back above where we were. So a lot of people would look at that and say, oh, we're there again. Right. But we've had inflation, right? Yep. So prices are, would have been at this level anyway. It's somewhat within affordability, depending on where you are. There's some areas that have maxed out on that. Sure. But the key, like you said, is the lending environment. And that is a very important metric to look at when trying to determine what's coming. Because it doesn't matter what's happened so much as where we're headed.
Correct.
Where are we headed? And when you look at the fact that ever since then, there's been new laws that won't let banks do that kind of stuff, at least right now. Yeah. And that people, Rich and I on this house, we've been trying to get a refi for 3 months. And we're complicated. We have LLCs all over the place, and we're not the easiest borrower, but it's been really difficult. And I like that. I'm glad it's difficult.
Yes, exactly.
So over the past 10 years, people have had to qualify. Many paid cash. You had to put a down payment. You had to prove without a doubt that you had the ability to pay. And since then, values have gone up. They've doubled in some areas. They've tripled in some areas, but the cash out refinances have not really been that active because people are scared. So you've got people today locked into very low fixed rate mortgages. Yeah. Most were fixed rate. Most had high credit, reserves, down payments. They have low locked in fixed rate payments and tons of equity. So even if they were like, maybe I do want to cash out refi, they're not going to touch that 2% mortgage, So if there was a recession, and there will be, and people lost their jobs, would you walk away from your fixed rate mortgage payment that's a third of the cost to go out and rent somewhere
Exactly.
and lose all the equity? Like, no. And 10 years ago, I don't even know when Airbnb came out, but 10 years ago, we didn't have Uber, we didn't have Airbnb, we didn't have these things. If you wanted to rent your rooms out, which we did, that was kind of how we built our wealth in the beginning. We bought a house and did what they call the house hacking or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why it's called that, but renting out rooms, let's just call it that. We would rent out rooms. We had like a in-law suite, and then we turned another little office area into a studio. And that's how we built our initial wealth is house hacking. But we had to get people on Craigslist, and they were questionable. Let's just say they were questionable people. There was no background checking or anything. It was just like, hey, this person. Anyway, today, now you can rent out a room in your house and you can have a whole background on that person and, see other people's ratings on them. This didn't exist. So if someone gets into financial trouble, they're not going to just walk away. It doesn't work. No. Yeah. So it's a very different scenario. I believe housing is solid. We have the opposite problem where there's more demand for housing than there is the supply of it. And that when you've got those kind of imbalances, and they're severe. Oh yeah. Severe imbalances on supply and demand. Even if we had a pretty severe recession in terms of stock market and people losing jobs, there's still so much demand for housing. It would almost be a good thing for the housing market to stabilize. Sure. But if you're waiting for your foreclosure, if you're waiting for your real estate crash, you might be waiting a while.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I wanted to take this is 2019, 2020 is not, I don't know, 06, 07, pick your year, because lending is so different and low rate interest rates. You're not going to walk away. Airbnb, all exactly where I wanted this to go. So people, if you're out there sitting on your hands going, I'm waiting for the crash because we're at the peak, or it's, just like last time. Sorry, it's not like last time.
Right. Yeah. I had a guy who he heard me on, I was on Good Morning San Diego, and I had an event that night in San Diego, and this guy heard me and came to the thing, and he's sitting in the front row with his arm crossed. And, I don't blame him. I mean, most real estate agents are always cheerful, and it's always a good time to buy. There's no crash. Buy. I get it. And I've never wanted to be that person. And when I see danger coming, believe me, I'm the first one that wants to tell the world. Yeah. So I can see why if I'm in front of the room saying this is an incredible time to buy, then people might doubt that, because most real estate agents will say that no matter what. Sure. But it's a good time to own a rental property. Yes. For so many reasons. It may not be a good time to buy your primary, depending on where you are. If I were in San Jose, California, or Mountain View,
chance.
No way. It's a bad time. Unless you're going to stay and raise a family and you love it there and your family's there and you're going to stay for 30 years.
Maybe.
Go, do it. We own this place. It'd be cheaper to rent, but we're going to stay here probably till they have to roll me out. And in that case, it makes sense. Yeah. Possibly, but it could, it could also make sense just to rent it for less and instead, have my whole portfolio in more growing markets where the cash flow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to go back to that story is, again, that story of the lady in Stockton, right? She sold 3 houses in let's just call it at the peak, and then bought 9 in a growing market, because there's a lot of people that took advantage of this, right? We're 10 years in now. So there's a lot of people that bought in California, both in your area and mine, that were buying stuff at 50% less or more.
Or more, yeah.
Or more, right? So, now you're near the peak again. Affordability is certainly different. Is it time to maybe do the 1031 exchange again for some California investors and look to other markets? So are you seeing that? Are you advising that?
Yeah, Californians I'm born and raised there. My mother born and raised, my grandmother. I mean, we're locals. Yeah. And my dad bought a house in Atherton for $99,000 when I was in junior high. He sold our Menlo Park house for 50,000 and we moved up to Atherton for 99.
Woohoo.
So it, and then by the time that I was graduating from high school, that house had gone up to $1 million, and he was like, what? So he sold it. Then the whole Silicon Valley thing popped,
Yeah.
and like 2 years later, it was worth 4 million. And then, he would go from, look, I made $1 million to, oh, I lost 4, it's just up and down.
Yeah.
So are we going to continue to see that? I mean, that is the ultimate question, right? Is are we going to continue to see the San Francisco Bay Area do what it's always done, which is just outperform
Yeah.
other markets? The kind of the answer is it depends when you buy.
Exactly.
If you buy now, like if you bought in 2006 at the peak, you are now, 10 years later, it took you 10 years just to get your value back after values drop. People don't remember that.
Yeah.
So if you bought at the peak, you didn't make any money.
Mm.
You spent 10 years just feeding a negative cash flow property, hoping the values come back. They did. But if you bought after it crashed in 2009, well, you've made a fortune.
Exactly.
You've made a fortune. But if you buy now, I don't see a crash coming, but you can only push prices so high. You can only push rent so high to the point where, people just can't afford it, or the rent control laws come in and stop it. I mean,
Exactly.
there's things that happen. So if you buy now, you're probably not going to see appreciation for a while because of government policy. Probably not going to be able to push your rents up. So what are you doing? You're just buying an expensive property that doesn't cash flow.
Yeah.
But for those who were super wise and bought when it was low, you've just made a ton of money. The biggest mistake that Californians make, and other people in high price markets, is they're still thinking about the price they paid versus what it's worth today.
Yep.
They're saying, but I cash flow in California. Well, sure. If you bought a property, it's true. I mean, yes, if you think in that mentality, I bought a property in San Jose for $500,000 in the downturn, and I'm getting $3,000 in rent. I'm cash flowing. Well, yeah, sure. What's your debt on it? Oh, I have no debt. Well,
Duh.
doggone it, you better be cash flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
If you own it 500,000. But if it's worth $1 million today, and you're getting 3,000 in rent, you are missing out every month on about $6,000.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So add it up over the years, you're losing money. That equity that's sitting there, you've got that equity compared to, or like current value compared to rent versus what you paid.
Yeah.
Because it's a lost opportunity. And again, so many people don't see that. They just believe in the San Francisco Bay Area. I can tell you right now, that is not wise. I'm going to give you 3 reasons. Okay. First one, you have all your eggs in one basket.
Yep.
So if you've got a $1 million rental property, what happens if that property goes vacant?
Yeah.
What happens if that person files bankruptcy and doesn't have to pay you rent for a year or 2?
Yeah.
What happens if there's an earthquake and you don't have earthquake insurance? And if you have earthquake insurance, you're definitely negative cash flow. So, if you took that property and went and bought, let's just say 5 properties in Orlando or Dallas or Houston, and in the areas where the millions of people are moving because it's affordable and because there's jobs there. So imagine you sold that one property and bought 5 elsewhere, or 10. I mean, you could literally buy 10. That's overwhelming to people. So I won't say that, but let's say you bought 5 and you had one really bad tenant and you had issues, and then that tenant didn't pay you. Guess what? You've got 4 other properties that are paying you.
Yep.
And if that one property also had a tornado or a hurricane and you were dealing with some insurance issues and stuff, you still have 4 other properties. Now, if you do what I teach, was that, hey, sell that $1 million property in California and buy 10. Again, I know that's overwhelming, but when you treat it like a business and you have your property management in place and all that, your team's in place, it's not as overwhelming as you might think. Now, imagine if 50% of your portfolio was a pain in the butt. Like, let's just imagine that 50% of it, they were vacant, you had bad tenants, you had all these things going on. You still have 5 other properties that are performing. So the chances, the importance of diversifying, I hope it, people can see that. Let's just say that the San Francisco Bay Area is not the epicenter um, of the tech industry
Mm-hmm.
anymore because it's moving.
Yeah.
I mean, it will always be, but when prices are so high and it's so impossible for people to survive and live, even if they have make 100 or 200,000 a year and they're living in poverty,
Yeah.
but they could go live in Austin or Orlando or Atlanta,
Yeah.
and live the good life with a home that's $200,000-$300,000, something like that, and make the same money. I mean, that's what we're seeing. That's why we're seeing millions of people moving to the Southeast.
Yep.
To just believe that the San Francisco Bay Area will always rise in value is a little risky.
A little risky.
A little. But I say that only because I'm born and raised there, and I'm it's half a century, that it has over time always gone up.
Yeah.
But we also didn't have the things back then that we have today, which is the ability to live anywhere, the ability to work anywhere. And the next 10 years are going to be so transformational, where you will be able to fly your car, or call the Uber and it flies you. You will be able to work really from anywhere, and have it be so real through VR and different different technologies that are coming, that we're obviously already seeing the trends. I'm in LA, right? I'm in LA right now. I'm from San Francisco, but a lot of people don't realize that the movie industry has moved. You've got Netflix in Albuquerque. You've got movies being made in Atlanta and Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Because why on earth would they do it here, where they just get taxed to death? And so don't rely on the past. That's the most important thing, that if I can say, don't look at the past to make your decisions. Look at what's coming. It's not that hard. Trust your gut, and make decisions that, try to get ahead of the curve. Just try to get ahead of the curve. That's how you'll survive the next 10 years.
I think that's great advice. Again, I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Cupertino. So we know the same areas. I'll say this: the Bay Area has seen its peak, right? Because of all the technology changes, and it's too much to tax here. And it's unaffordable, right? It's just so unaffordable. If you want to live here for 50 years, sure, go ahead and buy. You'll probably be okay. But as a rental or investment area today, it doesn't make sense. So, how can people follow you, reach out to Real Wealth Network? You're doing so many amazing things
Thank you.
How can people follow you?
Well, we do regular monthly events in the San Francisco Bay Area and in LA, and we bring out teams from across the country so that you can meet them and get familiar with these areas and go on their tours and learn and just see. I mean, one of the things I love doing is showing people America, because we think when we're from California, we're the only thing that exists. We're, a little narcissistic that way. There's a whole lot of great stuff happening outside of California, and they're beating us. They're beating us because they're more business friendly in these other areas. So when I bring people to places like Birmingham or, Huntsville, or like, what are we going to go look at a bunch of hay? No, you're going to meet a bunch of rocket scientists, actually.
Huntsville. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love taking people to other cities to see, look, there's massive growth in these cities that you probably didn't know was happening, but you can still buy for so cheap. So if you, you can go to Real Wealth Network to find out about those tours, to find out about our events. And then my podcast is The Real Wealth Show. And then I wrote a book to make sure that you don't make a mistake, because as excited as you and I are, people could leave this and go look on the internet and go buy a property in Atlanta or Orlando and say, well, Kathy told me to do it. And that is not what I'm suggesting, because you could lose everything.
Yes.
You could lose everything. There's a lot of sharks in this business. I surf out there in the ocean, but there's sharks out there, and I got to know how to protect myself. It's the same with real estate. I wrote Retire Rich with Rentals to make sure you don't do it wrong, that you go through the checklist, you get your inspections, you get your appraisals, you make sure you understand the crime rates. I mean, I'm constantly reporting, because I have a news show, Real Estate News, that's also a podcast, constantly reporting on people who got ripped off through some scammer in real estate. So just because you and I are super excited, it's because we know how to do it right.
Yep.
So please either read my book or someone else's book or listen to podcasts, and don't just say, well, they said these are great areas, so I'm just going to buy this property online and then find out it's in a war zone. And, anyway.
Yeah. Well, do me a favor. Make sure I get your address because I want to send you one of mine. We can swap.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
Autographed books. You got to autograph it for me. I keep a collection, so that'd be great.
I would love that. And so please read these books. Read these books. There's a lot of information and insight, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No problem.
I made it through almost the whole interview without coughing.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. I know you have to get ready for Wall Street Journal. That's going to be fun. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. I'm excited. All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Take care.
You
Bye.
too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.